Hey, what's up? This is Scott with Level Up Tutorials, and in the last video, we showed you how to make your first controller. Now, we're actually going to take this in a way, we're going to show you a best practice for controllers by using the controller as syntax. This sort of gets rid of the scope variable that we introduced, and now when you look at your templates, things will make a little bit more sense. In fact, if you have more than one controller per your template, then now everything will be much more organized. So using the controller as syntax is something that is really helpful to start doing early on so you don't get in the bad habit of just putting everything on scope. So let's check it out right now. Hey, what's up? This is Scott with Level Up Tutorials, and today we're going to continue our Angular series by showing you the controller as syntax. Now, the exact functionality of what we're doing right now isn't necessarily going to change. However, this is a best practice, and it's going to be a way that you can ensure that your code stays readable and organized in the future. So what we're going to go ahead and do first is modify our JavaScript file. So what we had here is we had this angular.module, and then we had our controller, okay? So inside of our controller, we're passing in scope. We have our scope.list. We have scope.addPerson. And if you remember, by adding things to scope, we're making it available to our controller within our HTML, right? So we can just say add person, and it's going to know what to do. It's going to know to go to this function. But what we want to do is, instead of just using the scope variable, we want to namespace this to the controller. So the way we can do that is using controller as. So now what we need to do in our JavaScript is to create a new variable. So we're going to say var, and now we can just add this as directory list, but I'm going to shorten it to just dir list like that. And what it's going to be equal to is this. Okay, now this is referring to the controller itself. Now what we don't have to do anymore is we don't have to have the scope variable passed into this function. So this can simply just be empty like that. Now every time we're using scope, we need to actually use dir list instead. Now notice how I have this in camel case, so underscore first and the second word is uppercased. Okay, so we now have dir list.addPerson, okay? And again, anytime that we're going to be using this scope, we're gonna not wanna use scope anymore. So again, we can just go and replace all the times that we used scope. Okay, and last one is scope.age right here. Okay. And as you can see by browsing to our site, you refresh, it's totally broken. And if you came into your inspect element and checked out your console, you'll see you're not really getting any errors because none of the data is on the scope variable, none of it's getting output. So to resolve that, we want to use controller as in our ng controller. So now here we can say directory controller, sure, but now we just need to say as, and then we can say dir list. Okay, so now we're saying we're going to use the directory controller, but we're going to use it as dir list. Now the only thing we really have to change here is anytime we're using a variable that was previously on the scope, we need to now use it with dir list instead of without anything. So before we just had list, even though it was scope.list in the JavaScript, but now that we're using controller as, we can say dir list.list. Okay, otherwise it just won't find lists. So we need to say dir list.list. And now anytime we're using anything, so like this function, add person is going to be dir list.addPerson. And since in our directory.js, we're using dir list.name and dir list.age as part of this ng model, we actually need to include that here. So we can say dir list.name and dir list.age. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and refresh our page. And as you can see, everything's working fine. Let's go ahead and add a new name. We can just say Jim, and Jim is 40, enter, and now we have Jim is back here. Perfect, so we can just keep on adding names. Tim, and Tim is 30, enter, perfect. Cool, so this is now working exactly as it was before. However, we're now using this new controller as syntax. Now, this may seem just a little like extra typing right now. I mean, we added extra typing pretty much everywhere to get this same exact functionality, but it really comes in handy. And if you're going to be having multiple controllers or something on the same template, if you have things that are on the scope variable, such as add person, if this was just on the scope variable, you wouldn't really have an idea of what controller that was representing. So by having dirlist.addPerson, you always know which controller if you're using multiple controllers. So for the remainder of the series, we're going to be using this syntax with everything we do because it is a best practice. Great, so now that we have this out of the way, you can work with controllers, you can add a little bit of functionality here. Now what we're going to get into is showing you really a lot of what the Angular template language is capable of accomplishing. Now we're not going to spend a ton of videos on it, but I want to show you the things that are super useful, like ngClass, ngShow, ngHide, a bunch of the directives that you're going to be using a lot to control your pages. And that way you have a nice arsenal of things to use with your new controller. Before we get into some more advanced topics like factory services, directives, grabbing content from an API and things like that. Cool, so as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. If you have any questions or comments, leave a comment in the video or hit us up at Twitter or Facebook at Level Up Tutorials. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.